So this is the Pixel 7 Pro, and I've been using it for the last couple of weeks now. I just wanted to give you guys my full review. So first, the design itself, it's a very clean device in my opinion. It's got a glossy back where I have the hazel colorway, so I personally really like this green. The aluminum frame is like a gold/silver color to it, which I think looks really nice. And the frame itself extends to the visor of the camera array, so it blends nicely into it. Only complaint there is that the frame does pick up a good amount of scratches, so if you're putting it on a flat surface or any kind of surface, especially maybe even a rough one, you are likely going to scratch it. So I definitely recommend a skin to cover that frame, or even a case to help raise it up a little bit from the flat surface. But either way, I think the device itself is very clean looking. It is glossy, so it does pick up a good amount of fingerprints, and the phone itself is overall a little bit slippery. It is rounded all around as far as like the edges and corners and whatnot, so the device itself I think feels pretty comfortable in the hand. It's got a decent weight to it where it's not super heavy but also not too super lightweight. But I definitely recommend adding a case, and when you do add a case, I feel like it adds a good amount of depth and weight and just makes the phone feel very nice in your hand, in my opinion. The buttons themselves are ergonomically pretty low. The volume rocker is below the power button though, so you might accidentally hit the volume rocker instead of the power button if you're not used to the volume rocker being below it. But either way, I got used to it over time. And you do have USB-C at the bottom, and you have dual firing speakers, and to me, I think the speakers sound pretty good overall. They could be a little bit better as far as like the volume and also as far as like the depth of the bass, but either way, they sound pretty good enough for watching content and listening to the occasional song. The whole phone itself is IP68 water and dust resistant rated as well, so if you get splashed by water, it's no big deal. As far as the display, it is a 6.7-inch 120Hz 1440p OLED display. It's a great display overall. Now, out of the box, it does come with Full HD turned on, so definitely go into the settings and turn on Quad HD just to get the best out of this display, even though there might not be a huge difference and the average person may not notice much of a difference, but still, you paid big bucks, so turn on the best settings possible. But either way, this display is great for watching content. It's big, it's got a bright, colorful, and vivid display in my opinion. I think it's great for watching content. You do have the ability to turn on either adaptive or natural mode, so it's up to you to decide which kind of color profile you prefer. But it does get plenty bright enough as well. It's definitely brighter than last year, so if you're in an outside condition where it's super bright outside or very sunny, you're definitely going to be able to see this display with no problem. It is a curved display, so some people may not like that. Personally, I think it looks pretty clean and elegant when it's a curved display, and since I use a case, I'm not bothered by any accidental touches. My only complaint is the fact that you can't really install a cheap tempered glass screen protector, just because some of the screen protectors that are cheap are usually like a TPU plastic key protector. Not a fan of those, so I always just end up not using any kind of screen protector on this kind of display. You also have minimum bezels, so you don't get many intrusions here. The single camera cutout doesn't get in the way either. As far as the biometrics, I would say they're fine. They're not the best out there, but they're also not potentially the worst. So for the fingerprint sensor, it's under the display, it's optical, it's definitely okay. There are some times where I'll miss, where I'll accidentally press the fingerprint sensor a little bit too fast, so it won't read my finger. And then with the facial recognition, which by the way is a new feature for this phone, it got taken away during the Pixel 6 series, but it's back now on the Pixel 7, and I think it's okay. So it's able to recognize me in decent lighting conditions, and also when I have my phone pretty much just directly in front of me. But if my phone is far away from me or to the side, it's definitely not going to recognize me. And if I'm in like pitch black situations or very, very low light situations, it's not going to recognize me either. So it could definitely be improved, I think, as far as the sensor maybe, or some of the software, but either way, it's still not the most secure either. The most secure way to unlock your device is definitely going to be with the fingerprint sensor. As far as the performance, you're going to be getting the Google Tensor Chip Generation 2 with 12 GB of RAM and then whatever storage variant you get. I would describe the performance to be good, but definitely could be better. So for my very basic stuff, such as checking social media, checking my email, YouTube, browsing around, it's a good experience. But once I start to do the more intensive stuff, or want to do the more intensive stuff, such as maybe multitasking or playing heavier intensive games that are graphically requiring a lot of processing, and also using the videos and cameras for a long time, I'll notice the phone does tend to warm up quite a bit, and compared to the competition, it gets the warmest fastest and feels the warmest. Like even when I'm using a case, I can still feel how warm this phone gets. So that is a bit of an issue and maybe a bit of a concern, especially for that battery as well, because it will drain that battery quite a bit if you're using this phone quite intensively. And not to mention, it definitely takes a bit of a hit in the performance. I'll notice some lag every now and then with the games themselves, or I'll notice some previews of the photos and videos I'm taking look very noisy and just very low in its frame rate as well. So For the heavier stuff, it definitely lacks a bit in that consistency and fluidity and good performance. But for my every other day stuff, such as, like I said, my basic level stuff, I honestly have a good experience and feel super fast and super snappy. But still, it's always good to remember or just keep in mind that this phone does tend to warm up quite a bit. As far as the software, I've been getting Android 13, and in my opinion, it's the more simpler and fluid and cleaner experience out of all Android experiences out there. So like I said, the animations are super clean, everything is very fast and snappy, which is thanks to Android 13 as well. But there's not a lot of customization here. So I guess that's why it's able to stay that super smooth and consistent, because there's not a lot of stuff going on with it. So some of the things you do have is, for one, you have Material You, which basically allows you to use the colors of your wallpaper to match that to the settings. But the one thing I don't like with not necessarily Material You, but just the whole OS itself, is the thick padded looking elements of some of the Material, or not Material You, of some of the OS systems, or settings. So for one, the quick settings, the volume rocker, they're pretty thick. And the reason I think they have that is to showcase the colors and show how it's matching the wallpaper, which I get it, but I'm just not a fan of how thick they look. But it's up to you. I guess it's a personal taste of whether you like that or not. I'm indifferent about it. But either way, that's the main aesthetic of the whole OS. Customization features, not much. On the home screen, you are able to freely move any apps anywhere, but except for the at a glance widget, which some people do not like that you can't move it. Same thing with the quick search bar at the bottom. You can't get rid of it or change it or anything like that. It's just there. It's part of the launcher itself. I find the at a glance widget to be misleading just because there's that empty gap and space there. You want to move apps there, or you feel like, or you think you can. But the reason you can't is because sometimes the at-a-glance widget will adapt and change depending on what kind of settings are available throughout your day, or notifications and stuff like that, or maybe calendar reminders and stuff like that. So it will dynamically change every now and then, so that's why it takes up that whole bar, but still, it can be a little bit misleading. You also at least have the Google Discover page available, which just allows you to browse Google articles based off your Google account, and in your app drawer, pretty simple, no customization here. You can't make folders or anything like that. Just all your apps in one drawer. The Pixel Launcher also has some multitasking abilities. So for one, you can definitely picture in picture with no problem here. Just, watch YouTube and then browse another app. You can also split the screen. I haven't really experienced that big of an issue with it. It can cause the phone to warm up a little bit with the performance, but it's pretty cool. So if you're watching, again, maybe YouTube, you can use YouTube and then also choose another app at the bottom. Not all apps are compatible, but some of the apps that I do use, like Reddit, is perfectly fine for this. So you can browse YouTube and also browse Reddit at the same time. And touching real quick on the ecosystem, you do have the Google ecosystem, so you can connect to some of the new Google hardware, such as Pixel Buds, Pixel Watches, and the future Pixel tablet. And you also have Samsung's ecosystem kind of in there, and maybe OnePlus and stuff like that, and just pretty much every other device except for maybe Apple devices. You have the ability to connect those all to this device as well. But the main thing is the Google ecosystem, which isn't that big quite yet. So if you're looking for a big ecosystem option, technically this device can connect to most ecosystems, but as far as like first party ecosystem, that being all Google stuff, it's not the biggest quite yet. So the main cool features are going to be the AI features mixing of the Google Tensor chip. So there are some camera stuff, but personally I'm not going to talk about that here. But some of the cool things that I noticed is, for one, that speech to text is actually pretty cool and pretty accurate, and also pretty fast and reliable to use. So if you like, recording yourself and actually want to see a transcript of what you're saying, the recording app on here is really fast and really accurate at what you're saying. You also have the live translate stuff, which basically allows you to translate what's on your screen to your native language. But the best features are the phone features here. So for one, you have Hold For Me. So basically it holds the line for you, especially if you're in a navigation menu system where it just has you answering different menu numbers and whatnot. The Google Assistant, if it's a well-known number, will have those navigation menus previewed for you, and you just pick from there. You don't have to wait for the assistant robocall to actually say those different options, which is pretty cool. I've never actually had to use it, but if I had to use it, I know I'm definitely using this phone to call any kind of 1-800 number. But the best ones are the call screening numbers, or the call screening options. So for robocalls, unknown numbers, first-time callers, you can turn on those categories so that the Google Assistant will answer the phone for you, so that you don't have to deal with them. So it just happens in the background. It'll either give you a live transcription of it happening live, or you can see it after the fact. And most of the time I notice that I don't even get called at all. I don't notice it at all. Like I said, it happens in the background, so I'll look at my call settings and I'll notice that there was a number that called me at some point. Sometimes I'll get a notification that there was a missed call, and half the time it's because they just hung up on me. They just hung up on the Google Assistant, I should say, actually. So that's very cool. You don't have to deal with robot calls anymore. You don't have to deal with spam calls anymore. They're all done in the background, and the Google Assistant will just hang up on them for you, or actually scare them away for you, essentially. You also have the option of screen calling someone you do know. So if a number calls you that you do know and you can't answer the phone, just hit screen call, and there you go. You can just watch a live transcription of what that person is saying. But overall, the software, I think, is very minimalistic, very simple, and not crazy to get lost in, and easy to understand, actually. So for someone who has a very basic lifestyle, who doesn't have the time to sit down and customize their phone like crazy, who just wants something like an iPhone that's very simple, because this is definitely the iPhone of Android, I would definitely get the Pixel 7 or any kind of Pixel series, because the software is very simple and easy to learn. And now that you have those cool AI features, anyone can use these AI features and definitely appreciate and love those AI features. And you'll also be getting a good amount of support here. So you'll be getting anywhere from, I think, 3 years of OS updates and 5 years of security updates, which is a good amount of time to get something out of this device, in my opinion. As far as the cameras, I think the quality itself is really good on the Pixel, but sometimes the experience can be a bit annoying. So for one, when I'm trying to zoom in, if I'm just scrolling up and down on the dial and then I want to click on one of the preset options such as 5x or 10x, whatever, I have to wait for it to settle, because if I just start clicking on the dial itself when it has all those white dots, it just moves up by 0.1x or moves down by 0.1x. And I find that very annoying. I just want to quickly switch between different focal lengths, I think that's what it's called. And number two being the processing. So for one, sometimes in the preview, your photo or your video will sometimes have a lot of noise, or you'll see the refresh rate, or the frame rate, I should say, drop quite a bit. You just have to wait for it to process after you're done taking the photo or after you're done taking the video. And even then, if you click right away once you take the shot, you have to wait for it to actually process properly. You'll see a little white circle in the bottom corner. It is pretty quick, I should say, but sometimes you just want to see it very quickly, because sometimes you'll be like, should I take another shot real quick, or should I wait, or what's going on? So sometimes it can be misleading, but it's honestly not a huge deal. And the third thing is sometimes the autofocus on here is very weird. It doesn't seem to be the best in my opinion. So most of the time I end up having to retake a shot anyway. So that's some of the things that I found annoying with the experience as far as taking photos and videos. But as far as the quality itself, I think it looks amazing. So the colors look really nice. I think it's pretty well balanced between natural and also vivid, so it doesn't look super fake. I think it does a decent amount of good processing and editing on the photos itself to look very nice in its colors. The skies look very blue, greens look very green, and it also doesn't look too fake in my opinion. I think photos look amazing on here. Some things to note here is that the ultra wide is a 0.5x, so you do get a decently wide field of view shot, and you can also get pretty close to a subject to get a macro like shot, which is actually pretty cool. You can get some pretty creative shots here. I absolutely love this, that when phones include this autofocus on their ultra wides. And when you switch to the telephoto, it is a 5x optical, so it is a bit further compared to other devices that have like a 3x or something like that, but it's still pretty cool that you can zoom in at 5x, and when you digitally zoom, it's up to a 30x, which I think doesn't look too bad either. But one thing I will note is that if you're switching between all three lenses really quickly and just taking a quick shot, you'll notice that sometimes it shifts quite a bit in its color. So that's the only thing, is that the colors may not be the most consistent when switching between the ultra wide, wide, and telephoto. Now, as far as the front camera, I think photos look relatively good on here as well. I think my skin color looks the best out of all devices on this phone. It just adds a good amount of color to my skin, and also was able to keep the background well colored as well. Now, there are some times where I do look a little bit too washed out, or maybe a little bit too fake in my skin color, but either way, I think selfies on here are good overall. And low light situation is also pretty impressive. So if you have a little bit of sun out still, or the sun has settled and you have a little bit of light, it's still able to get something out of that amount of light and get a decent looking shot. In pitch black situations, it does struggle a little bit, but either way, it's pitch black, so what do you expect? And then on the front, if you're in pitch black situations, it's gonna look bad, but if you have a little bit of light, then it won't look that bad. As far as video, you do cap out at 4K, I believe 60, but I just recorded in 4K 30, so to me, Videos look pretty good overall, so again, it adds a good amount of color to make it not look super fake, but also not look super natural in my opinion. So again, the skies look relatively blue, greens, if there's greens, it looks green, and then just overall the quality is good overall. So for video, it's probably not the best out there as far as how smooth and cinematic it looks, but I find it to look just fine. And when you're zooming in, you are capped out at 20x, so that's actually pretty good compared to the competition. Some phones only go up to like a 15x or something like that. This one allows you to go up to 20x. You also have a ton of other features on here which I haven't really used, but some I did use was active stabilization, where you're able to stabilize the video to get a well gimbal-like stabilized video, which is pretty cool. You also have cinematic mode, which is new this year, which adds fake blur or fake bokeh to make the video look cinematic. It is capped out at 1080p though, so that's up to you to decide if you want to use it. I personally am not a fan of the fake blur, but it's there if you want to use it. The camera itself is decently optimized for Snapchat and I believe Instagram as well. So for some social media apps, you'll be getting a pretty well optimized phone here. But overall, I find the camera system to be, again, really good in the way the photos and videos look. But it's just sometimes the experience can be annoying. But either way, if you get this phone, you're going to be getting a really good camera system here. As far as battery life, I'm going to be getting a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and I would find the experience to be good, but again, could be better. So I kept describing it before as like an all-day battery life. I still stand by that, but as more time has gone by, you definitely get to flush out any kind of software tweaking that it needs to do with the battery. And I would find that I can get through the whole day with no problem as long as I'm working that day. So as long as I'm not using the phone heavily, then I can definitely make it to the end of the night and maybe end with like 20% battery life. Sometimes I'll get around the teens and stuff like that. But if you're a heavier user, there's definitely going to be times where you'll likely have to charge around maybe 8 p.m. at the latest, or sometimes at like 5 or 6 p.m. at the earliest. So definitely depends on your type of usage and what kind of apps you use, and also how long you're using the device for. So my screen on time, it really varies from day to day. So sometimes it's anywhere from like 2 hours to maybe 4 or 5 hours screen on time. And that's just me, how I use my phone and whether I'm not using my phone a lot that day. So my screen on time, again, will vary, and everyone's will vary all the time and what you're doing. So I would say the battery overall is good, but definitely could be better. The charging speeds though, I definitely would say could also be better. They're pretty trash compared again to the competition. So it only has 23 watts of fast charging. So it takes well around an hour and like 40 to 30 minutes to fully charge. It's pretty slow, but from 0 to 50, I think it takes about like a half hour or so. So if you're in a pinch, you should be able to get something out of a few, I wouldn't say few minutes, but after a little bit of time. The phone also has reverse wireless charging and wireless charging. And one interesting thing I came across was that when I used my Samsung wireless charger Trio, whether I had adaptive charging turned on or off, I would wake up to the phone not fully charged. It would be anywhere from like 50 to 70 to 80% battery life. It just wouldn't be fully charged. And then when I used my other wireless charger, which I believe is like a 15 watt fast wireless charger, if I had adaptive charging turned off, this phone would be super hot in the morning. I would take it off the charger, it would be fully charged, but it'd be super hot. And so when I noticed that, I was like, maybe I need to turn adaptive charging back on. So I went back and turned it on. At first it didn't change much, but over some time, once it learned how I was charging my device, it was able to, I guess, figure out what point it should trickle charge and at what point it should charge faster. Because when I woke up in the morning, it was no longer super hot and it was at 100% battery life. So that was an interesting experience. That also fixes my issue that I originally had a long time ago, where my wireless charger Trio never was able to get my phone to 100% with adaptive charging on. So at least I fixed that issue, but still an issue to keep in mind that whenever you're using a wireless charger and it's fast wireless charging, don't use it overnight because this phone in the morning will be super hot. Overall, the Pixel 7 Pro is a good device. Yes, it's got some flaws, but usually in my day-to-day, I don't come across these issues unless I'm really pushing the device. So this is how I will end up labeling it. So I think it's good enough for most everyone, for the average person, but for the pro user and heavy intensive user, I don't think this phone is quite enough yet. So that's how I would look at it. Think about what kind of user you are and go from there. But I would still recommend getting this device at a good sale too. So I know I missed and I'm a little late for Black Friday, but if the phone ever goes back to that good price that they had for $750 plus a trade-in to get it cheaper, definitely snatch it there, because at that point, that's a very good deal. So that's where I'm at with the Pixel 7 Pro. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully this was helpful. Peace.